everything off?
Very nice shining show.
Well, guess what? When you get one like this,
You may not be able to do
it's asking for trouble. Any questions, anything regarding Patton, Third Army? You got questions? I'm trying to wait, see all these vehicles are coming back in now. It's gonna get a little noisy. We got these for boots like that.
Oh my goodness, look at them.
That's alright. Grab a chair, guys. Wait for this tank to get parked. Yeah, sure. Anybody got a beer bottle or something?
You're asking the MP.
I am an MP for real. And a civilian officer.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I'd make a Molotov cocktail. Get rid of that thing.
What's your name?
The Sherman. The tank. Don't you know how to kill a tank? Tanks are easy to kill.
Okay, I've done my deal with moving the freaking tank, okay? You know, I got a feeling that didn't do a bit of good.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present General George S. Patton, Jr., the Commanding General of 3rd U.S. Army.
Better all stand and salute.
See?
Be seated.
It gets started now. They do this every year. Every freaking year.
Well, of course he got started. I'm here.
That's what I said.
I knew if we didn't get started, though, he'd never get started.
I'm going to get a soda bottle and a little gasoline. We'll have a barbecue.
Well, I can talk above it, or we can wait.
Let's see if he starts moving here.
He got the lever down.
Yeah.
Waiting for the RPs to build up. Revving it up, got it in first gear.
Yeah. See, we're both old tankers too. So.
I've heard these tanks so many times I can tell you what they're doing.
Yeah.
Here we go.
In the Army, I was tank. You know what tanks are, right? They're camp people. You eat and serve. Tell you I'm gross. I don't care. Alright, General, what we're going to do is we're going to start our brief with the G1, go in sequence, 2, 3, 4. Everything that you've asked about recently, and we've got some updates on some of the equipment and operations for you. G1.
Yes, sir. General, we've been receiving heavy artillery fire in the Hickory section. The engineers on the bridge have been forced to withdraw equipment while the Corps artillery fired 23 counter battery missions, which reduced the enemy's artillery fire. ComNet continues to improve the bridgeheads in this section here, sir. General, we've also received a recent eyes-only message from a runner for you from the Army Information Services.
Bring him in.
So, Major General Irwin needs air support for an attack that he intends to launch at 1300 hours.
He bring you the coordinates?
Yes, sir.
General Gay? General Gay?
On the phone.
escort him to the liaison 19th Air Tactical Command under my orders, have him deliver that message directly, have the liaison get a hold of Opie Wafin, and I want those planes ready to go at no later than 0200 hours, and go ahead and, I'm sorry, make it, well, yeah, 0200
Well,
hours.
they've got the new P-61 night fighters now, sir.
Make it happen. All right, I want to report on the damage when they get back.
Just think of the crowd spaces when they see those night fighters.
You're dismissed.
Thank you.
Continue on, sir. Over the past 24 hours, Combat Artillery fired 155 rounds of 155 millimeter shells, 100 rounds of 8-inch howitzers, and 25 rounds of 240 howitzer ammunition were fired. This concludes my briefing, General. Do you have any further questions?
I want you to put in a requisition for the ammunition that you need. I've been to our supply depot and our ordnance and our battlefield recovery. We have quite a few of the German artillery pieces with ammunition that we captured. I want you to sit and take that to artillery units, learn how to fire those damn things, and let's shoot some of that German crap back at them. Okay?
Yes, sir.
We will continue to do that until we get our own ammunition back.
Yes, sir.
Didn't you tell me we had a bridge out?
Yes, sir.
All right, you tell the engineers I want to talk to them after, tell the colonel I want to talk to him, okay?
Colonel Martin, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, we'll get it done.
The G2 will now make their briefing, sir.
Thank you. General, intelligence activity has revealed the following enemy units are operating within the 3rd Army sector. Excuse me for my stumbling through these crap names, sir. I have a hard time with them. All right, we've got Army Group G under General Falk. He's recently replaced General Blaskowitz. I have a dossier on these gentlemen. Would you like to see them now or after the briefing?
I'd like to see the dossier after the briefing. We're going to have a ultra briefing after this, so
Yes, sir.
do that.
Currently, the 3rd Army is operating against 2 field armies. 1st Army commanded by Lieutenant General Koppelsdorf and 5th Panzer Army commanded by Lieutenant General von Montfeld. Corps under 1st Army include the 13th SS Corps commanded by General Priest, 89th Corps by Major General Haney, and the 82nd Corps commanded by Major General Hornline, who recently replaced Major General Sinfuber. Corps under the 5th Panzer Army. 47th Panzer Corps, commanded by Major General von Ludwitz, 58th Panzer Corps, Major General Kruger as commander. Enemy troop strength remains high, morale in some cases, and we have a lot of fanatical resistance, especially in the Fort Driant area. General, my briefing is complete. Do you need anything else?
Did I understand correctly that fanatical resistance came from that SS colonel in charge of one of those things?
Yeah, so that's what we're getting.
Did I hear a report? Was it correct that he said he would rather die than surrender?
I believe that's what we got.
I want you to take some of that German petrol that we captured the other day, as many gallons as you can wind up. That crap don't run in our tanks very well anyway. I want you to go and find a place, pour it down where that son of a bitch lives, as much down the hatch as you possibly can. Tell him we're going to have a nice crowd barbecue, and if he wants to die in place, he's welcome to, and then throw the lighter down.
Yes, sir. We'll see if we can help him out.
All right.
Thank you, sir. B1.
General, our current operational strength is 2,600 men under strength. The 5th Division is short 440. The 35th Division is short 220. The 79th Division is short 770. The 80th and the 6th Armored are short 160. Replacement battalions are providing troops, but it appears that the units are not providing the replacement information on the casualty report, so we're not getting the proper count.
All right, here's what I want you to start doing about it. I've talked to the Provost Marshal. He tells me that there's roughly about 1,000 of our soldiers that are in jail for one thing or another. Hell, they were drunk, they didn't salute somebody, bunch of bullshit stuff. So I want all 1,000 of them brought to my headquarters, and we're going to put them back to work. That'll give us a few. Then I want you to issue orders to everybody under my headquarters command that I'm going to shorten it about 10%. And if they don't volunteer, I'm going to volunteer their ass, okay?
Yes, sir.
And take the anti-aircraft crews that we have that are not currently protecting different groups, cannibalize them. We got a lot of people in our lower echelon that's double staffed and triple staffed. Let's bring them back to one staff and bring them up. Then we'll see what we need. They're going to have to take them right out and put them into those units. Also want you to get a hold of, have General Gay get a hold of Blucher on Eisenhower staff and tell him what the shortage is. A lot of this can be done through the Deputy Commander Lee and with SOS, but he doesn't seem to understand the shortage. Also, we have the 761st Tank Battalion, I understand, is going around in circles in the States.
Yes, sir.
I want them ordered up here. They're good. As much training as they had, they're going to be damn good soldiers, I think. And there's about 20 black soldiers who were arrested in England, I believe, for a race ride. You bring them, we're going to put them back into service too.
Yes, sir.
And you get to it.
Yes, sir.
General, sir. The Germans have destroyed an important supply bridge. May impact our receiving ammunition for the tanks, sir.
This around Nancy?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Gasoline that has been acquired for the use of the Third Army has arrived. Also, with the arrival of gasoline, the Private Clark is currently fueling your Jeep. Fuel delivery by aircraft has been difficult due to adverse weather conditions. The 4 cargo planes overshot the runway at airstrip at E10. One of the planes was shot down by the Germans and the other 3 were lost. The result was that out of 20,000 blankets, 10,000 litters, 370 oxygen cylinders, Lucky received only 2,500 blankets, 1,000 litters, and 100 oxygen cylinders. We have also been advised by Eagle that movement priorities and our ammunition, food, and finally POL. G4 that does not anticipate this impacting replacements at this time, sir.
All right. I've heard about all that bridge, Nancy, I want to hear about. You get a hold of the colonel, tell him this is direct from me. The last communication I had from him, he said it would take him a good 3 days to repair that bridge so we can run trains across it. Now I've got medical personnel that have loaded those trains up with the wounded, and we need to get them to Paris, and we need to get them there soon. So here's what we're going to do. I want to find every searchlight we got in this area. I want to take all the remaining anti-aircraft guns that we have. We're going to line them up there to that bridge. And we're going to work 24 hours. And when it gets dark, we're going to light those goddamn searchlights up, and we're going to have us a damn fine Hinkle shoot. And you tell him that that train crosses that bridge tomorrow morning. And if he can't do it, tell him to name his replacement.
Yes, sir. Here we have arranged for transportation of replacements using the 53rd Replacement Battalion vehicles from the 17th Replacement Depot at Hagersville until the replacement transportation issue is resolved. We've instructed the maintenance units to report the top problems that they are having with vehicles. Top problems identified by maintenance units are dry batteries, motors and differentials burned out for lack of grease and oil, underinflation of tires, and the lack of valve caps. We have instructed the maintenance companies to provide checklists for drivers to help maintain their vehicles. General, this completes my briefing. Do you have any questions, sir?
I want you to go and get a hold of ordnance. I want all of the vehicles that we have set up for repair, drain what oil and gasoline are in them. I want them shipped back up to the front. And I want requisition orders given to each one of those men. And before they can accept the gasoline, they're going to go from one end of their truck to the other, or Jeep, or whatever the hell it is, and make sure that if all hits the specifications, the tires are 35 PES, you got it? And I want all of it done and everything checked before it rolls out of there. And the next son of a bitch that runs out of oil because he didn't put in it is going to the brig.
Yes, sir.
You're dismissed.
Thank you, sir.
General, that concludes your briefing right now. Got members of the staff out getting updates on everything, and we'll let you know when that stuff is available, if it becomes available. That's all we have at this time.
Now, what you heard, I hope you heard it anyway, was what you would have heard if you was in Patton's headquarters at this particular period of time in history. It was far more complicated than that. There was a lot more of his staff. Each one of the staff colonels who had something to tell him about it. The briefing took place normally between 9 and 9:30 every morning, and it was done without fail unless he was out in the field. And when he came back in, then he would contact the same group, and they would he would have questions of the day, and he wanted to know what was happening in the maps. They had on the other side of his war room, there was a situation room with all the maps, and knew where all of the German units were, where they thought they were going, the whole thing. And so he had up-to-date 24/7 by the folks in the troops. And then he had the Army Information Service, which was rare, and it only existed in his headquarters. He had taken the 6th Cavalry Group and he had divided them up in squadrons, and they would literally go out to the front fighting and get to the generals who were there and say, "Sir, what do you need? What can we tell General Patton?" And they would write down, and then they would bring it back. He could get communications like that within 7 or 8 hours, and by the time he got the information decoded and it was sent by telegraph or by radio, it sometimes took 24 hours. So he had up-to-date information. He also had the 19th Air Tactical Command that would fly over the area and take photographs, and so he had direct photograph, and they could take a photograph, bring it to the headquarters, develop it, bring it to intelligence, see what was on it, and then give Patton a briefing within less than 24 hours, and correct the maps, and print the maps, and send them back out to the soldiers. And it was all done manually. There's none of the stuff that we have today. So he had as modern a communications network as any. In fact, he actually changed the way warfare was thought about after his jaunt through 3rd Army by the end of the war. And the after-action reports show that everything was new and innovative. This was the first time this was ever done. Think about it. They had Army groups. You know what an Army group is? Yeah, you know. That 2 or 3 armies together, grouped together. Montgomery had the 21st Army Group, which had Canadians and the British, and he had an American Army. That's 3 armies. Armies had 3 corps to each of the armies, and each corps had an average of 3 divisions. Now you figure up what it all was out there, and all the men, the tanks, and the trucks, and all that was involved in that. Then you have all the different. Patton's army itself.
Excuse me, sir. Eagle just landed.
Okay, well, he'll get here in a minute. All right. So you get an idea. So what we're going to do is, I know you have probably questions, okay, things that you want to know. So rather than me tell you all that stuff, which would be kind of boring, is I'm going to ask you to have questions. And I understand that I'm going to pay attention like you didn't show up, and my boss just showed up, General Bradley. Yes, sir, General Bradley. Glad to see you, sir. How are you doing? It's been so long since I've seen you, sir.
Yeah. Better see you tomorrow.
Oh, we got that briefing. I'm looking forward to it. You know, it's going to be a great briefing. Montgomery won't be there, will he?
Probably not.
That's wonderful.
That's everybody's supposed to be, so he probably.
Well, you know him. He's probably out tidying up the battlefield. Okay. Is there something you need? I was going to ask. Our press corps was going to ask questions, and would you like to be on the press corps? Have them ask you some questions too?
If they have them.
All right. Well, I'm sure they do. Now, Patton had a mouth on him, as you might have gathered, and Eisenhower was pretty afraid that he might say something that he shouldn't. Not Patton, right? So the public information officer, if you were the press corps, the public information officer would allow you to write your reports. but you had to submit them to him. And he would scratch them off and blank them, telling you couldn't send them. All the photographs that the public, that the news, public relations and the news media would have at that time were all developed by the Army. And they told them what photographs they could use, and then they were shared. You didn't have any personal photographs that you could send to Look or Life or something like that. It was all belonged to the Army. Everything you wrote belonged to the Army, and they decided what would go out to the different magazines, from newsreels and stuff. So you're those reporters, and you want to get information, and also you just want to know what happened. So any of you that have questions, just have them. Anything you want to know about Patton, just or Bradley or Buck. Yes, sir.
Let's say you go on a retreat and electricity. Besides the Bible, what five books would you bring? What 5 musical albums would you bring? What 5 movies would you bring? Anything more on Bradley?
What?
What 5 books would you bring? What 5 musical albums?
Oh, what did I have in my headquarters to listen to in the books that I read? Is that what you want to know?
If you want to like a retreat or something like that.
Okay.
What 5 movies?
All right, Patton, I'm not sure about size, but Patton had a library in his headquarters.
There's nothing to stop. What? I'm sorry. What?
They got the whip.
Stand up. Shout that question out.
Let's say you're going on a retreat. What 5, besides the Bible, what 5 books would you bring? What 5 musical albums? Because back then they didn't have CDs.
If I was going on a retreat,
Yeah.
I only had one vacation in the whole time. I didn't bring crap with me. I went and had a good time. But I will tell you what he had at his headquarters and what he read, okay? He had a phonograph inside of his command van. And the phonograph player, which we call a record player, was teaching him how to learn Spanish. He didn't know how to speak Spanish, so he had a how to learn to speak Spanish on a 78 record, and he would play that back and forth. He also had a regular radio inside his van, and he would listen to whatever the Armed Forces radio would come on, because he liked to listen to music when he had the time. He wrote prolifically, and he read. There is a book called The Patton Mind, and it has a list of several hundred books that he read during that period of time. One of his favorite books was, I can't think of the poet, but there was a famous poet at the time, and he loved to read about him, and he kept that. He would also read poetry when he could. He also wrote poetry, and so he would do that in his leisure. So he was one of the most read generals that we had. He was constantly reading. He also read General Rommel's book, Attack, that he wrote back in World War I. And he had that. He didn't read it until 1944. He also read a lot about William the Conqueror. He liked Napoleon, so he read a lot about Napoleon. In fact, his wife was reading him Napoleon the day he died. So he loved history books. He donated most of his library, his family did, to West Point. And there was an author that went through all of his books that he had read. He had little notations on all the books. He had some rare ones too. And he would say, we need to find out about this, we need to look about this, we need to read about that. And then he would go look up all these different battles and stuff all of his life. So he loved to read. Now the last thing he did at night was he would call his secretary in and he would write letters. If it was somebody he knew that was killed, he would write a personal letter to the widow or to the family. He also then would write his diary, and if something come up very quickly, or an order or something came to him, he would have them scribble out an order and send it to his communication zone. So he would sleep very little. He would sometimes get to bed at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was up by 5 or 6 in the morning. If there was any, and then they would woke up all the time for emergency briefings. Next question. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I've read books that talk about prayers that Patton said, like word for word. Did Patton write down his prayers, like in his diary or something? How do we know what he prayed about?
Well, in 1943, he was asked to write a prayer. As many of the generals, even Eisenhower wrote a prayer, and they put it in a prayer book, and it was published. And
that particular prayer was put into a song, and music was put to it. The Patton prayer that was attributed to him during the Battle of the Bulge was written by Colonel Hugh O'Neill, his chaplain, for him, and he approved it, and that was what went out. As far as Patton's religious principles, he was an Episcopalian, Christian, and he prayed quite a bit. His passion was not so much prayers, but he liked to write poetry. And some of his poetry is pretty good. Some of it ain't. His famous poem, Through a Looking Glass Though Darkly, you can look that up. It goes quite a few stanzas. And a little bit is quoted in the Patton movie. And to the travail of ages and the pomp and circumstances of war, I've lived and tried many times countenance upon the star. And through a looking glass though darkly is an exact quote from the Bible. But this he goes through all the way from being killing a mastodon and having the jawbone of an axe and piercing Christ as a Roman soldier, all the way through Napoleonic Wars. And so it's an excellent poem, and everybody likes to read it. And it's written pretty well. But he has some other poems that, yeah. But there's a whole book of poems you can get by Patton. And that help you? Didn't know that, did you? All right, yes.
So, what would a peacetime Patton have done if he would have survived the war? I mean, Bradley survived the war.
Well, he was in the process of writing a book.
Yeah.
He was thrilled about it. He was sitting at church home. Beatrice heavily didacted the book because it was pretty negative on Eisenhower, Montgomery, and the things that he thought were really wrong. He was due to resign from the Army and have that book published. Beatrice, his wife, thought it was a very bad idea because her two daughters and her son were going to be her daughters were very career military. And Eisenhower was going to be chief of staff and later president, and you just didn't write bad things and stuck to stay in the service. And so she thought her two daughters' husbands would get a bad shake out of it, and certainly thought her son, who wanted to be a career military, would have, and they would have. So the only book that's ever put out by him was War as I Knew It, under his name, but it's heavily didacted. So I'm glad you brought that up. I knew that when I started writing my books. So I wrote what he would have written. And exactly, I used his entire real diary, undidacted, and all of the different things that happened. And it's not me writing any of these books. It's what the soldiers said, he said, or they said at the time to him, and it goes day by day in chronological order. It starts right after the slapping incident and goes every single day of the war, and it ends on July the 7th, 1945. And we have the books for sale if you're interested. And that will tell you pretty much, had he had the chance, what he would have wrote. And the Patton family, by the way, have these copies, and they agree with me. They say it's the most definitive book ever written about Patton in that period, about his headquarters and what he personally thought. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Staff Sergeant Betts, 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion. Sir, what was your greatest moment as an Olympian?
What was the greatest moment? What?
As an Olympian, sir.
The whole damn thing.
Yes, sir.
I was able to represent our country in the World Olympics and triathlon, and I think I did pretty good. But there's always been this question when we went to fire our pistols. Back then, they didn't put a piece of white paper behind the target every time you shot, and I had a jagged hole going. And I'll tell you, I think my last round went through that hole. They said I missed. It was the difference between not placing and having a go. But they're the judges, and it didn't matter. But after the war, I went back, and we fired that same course again. I put all 10 of my rounds in the damn holes.
Yes,
So, history will have to judge that one.
Yes, sir. May I?
One more. Go ahead.
What'd you find, Willie?
Oh, have a seat. This is
Yes, sir.
all right. I love this story.
There I was.
First of all, Willie, his dog, was not named after William the Conqueror, and he was not a coward dog. He was an English Bull Terrier. Years before Patton had an English Bull Terrier, he had named Tank. Fits, don't it? But if you breed those dogs too closely, this one was deaf, couldn't hear a thing. And he's always wanted to have a pure breed English Bull Terrier. He loved Tank. Tank lived his natural life. So when he was in England, he asked Kay Summersby, which was Eisenhower's driver and lover, and a couple other Lady Lee's, who was General Lee's wife, if they would look and see if they could find him an English Bull Terrier. There was an English RAF officer who had a little English Bull Terrier, and he would take him up on knife flights over Germany. And one day he decided not to take him up, and the officer did not return. So we had an orphan English Bull Terrier. That dog's name was Punch. And so Patton was told that there was one that was there, and he went to look at it, and the dog was undernourished a little bit, and he looked at him, and he had him around and called him Punch, and he said, you know, I'm going to fatten you up just like I would and make you fat as a tick. And then he remembered. When his youngest daughter, Ruth Ellen, was having her coming out party, he was having a big barbecue. Now, he was a political man. Don't ever think, you see the movie, he didn't believe in politics. He didn't believe in Democrat, Republican politics type stuff. He never voted. But he knew the politics within the Army. And so he had things he wanted to present to the generals, to the things he wanted to get done, so he invited them. And he invited some young men to come visit his daughter, if they were, of course, stayed away, but they could look. And then he did something that was unheard of. The best cooks in the Army were black, and the Army was segregated. So he invited all of the cooks to come cook at the base for him, and he had pigs and cows all chopped up and barbecued, and he told them they could have all the stuff that was left over and cook for themselves, which was also unheard of. So he's going around this camp, and he happens to go around a tree, and there's a little black fella, and he's eating his fill for the very first time in his life because this was a depression. He's full. And well, if you've never eaten very much and you go eat a big meal, you're going to double over. That's what happened to little fella. His name was Willie Wimple. And he was sitting there and he was going, oh, I'm little Willie Wimple and I'm as full as a tick. So he looked down at that little dog and he named him Willie. Now, if you doubt anything that I say, and a lot of people do because of the movie, you are to go to the button box, the book by Ruth Ellen Totten. It is in that book that she tells the story of how Willie got his name. See, because if you talk history, you need to back it up with facts. And that's the fact. So the little dog's name was changed. He lived out his life. He was brought back to the States. He was brought to Hamilton, Massachusetts. In the process, he got in a couple of dog fights, and he won one of them with Eisenhower's dog. Almost killed the dog. And then he went back and was in Hamilton, Massachusetts. He lived for another 12 years, and he's buried there in an unmarked grave. And the dogs normally live about 12, 13 years. So that's the true story of Willie.
Thank you, sir.
You didn't know that one, did you? Isn't that a cool story? Yes, sir.
General Patton, were you ever involved in executing any kind of a traitor during World War II?
We captured some Germans in American uniforms during the Battle of the Bulge. They were giving a very quick and honest trial and shot. Did that help? Yes.
Alright, First Class David Haney, 601st Tank Battalion. My question for you is, do you know where General Patton was born?
Yes, he was born in Gabriel in 1885. That's in California. He was the son of Wilson Patton. He grew up there from 1885. When he was old enough to talk, he thought being a soldier was the greatest thing. And one of the reasons is his father was a lawyer, and they would bring by Civil War veterans that had actually fought in the Civil War. And he would sit down and listen to these war stories, and he thought they were just wonderful. So in the beginnings of his life, he wanted to be a general. He thought that was the greatest calling in the world, is to be a general. So everything in his psyche was based on what does it take to be a general from the time he was a little guy. And so he met these veterans. He actually visited the Civil War battlefields. He had relatives that fought during the Civil War. One was killed. He visited the battlefield where he was buried. So he felt like that this was going to be a calling in his life. He was born November 11th, 1885. Now, what's cool about November 11th? That's when the World War I ended, and there was Armistice Day, and now it's
Veterans.
yeah, that's what I said, Veterans Day. I'm tired. So every Veterans Day, I think about Patton and veterans. Did that help you? Did it give you an answer? And he also had loved horses. And one of his first horses' name was Marmaduke. And you know why I tell you that? Because I had somebody that had read a book, a little obscure little book, and it had the name. It said, "Do you know Patton's first horse's name?" Yeah.
Well, for Patton, for General Patton, is there a level of hypocrisy there as far as the U.S. your decision to slap the soldiers who were at battle fatigue and wanted to send them back to the front, only then for then Eisenhower to order the execution of Private Slovak?
That was Bradley that ordered the execution of Private Slovak.
Oh, did he?
And yeah, and no. Let me explain something. There was two soldiers, not one.
Right.
One of them was named Bennett, the other one was named Cruel. Patton was an old-style soldier. And he thought, when he saw them, and he thought they were cowards, he didn't understand about PTSD, shell shock, whatever you want to call it. That was not. And a lot of people were using getting to the hospital to get out of fighting, real cowards, not people who were sick or so. He thought if you slapped one of them, got them out of the hospital, it'd be a lesson to the rest of them. They wouldn't try to get in the hospital. After he did it, he wished he had never done it, ever. And he regretted it for the rest of his life. So he talked about that once, and he said, what I should have done was bring them up before a summary court-martial. And if they would have been found guilty, they'd have been found guilty of treason, and the treason would then have, a court would have probably brought them up at the time of war, and they could have been shot. He was against shooting American soldiers at any kind. So he would probably have wanted him to go. Now, Bennett, let me tell you about him. In Patton's diary, there is, because Beatrice went through the whole diary in the Patton papers, and I have a copy of it, there's a notation, and it said that Bennett was arrested from, he refused to get on the landing craft at Normandy. He was arrested and sent to Leavenworth. Same guy. So, he freely admitted his methods was wrong. He did. And had he not done that, he would have probably been where Bradley was, leading an army group. He had a lot that bothered him a lot. And but he was a human being. If he hadn't been such a good battlefield commander, that would have sacked him and they'd sent him back. There was a lot of talk in the States, pro and con, and they began to keep all kinds of lists whether or not they needed to keep him or not, because they knew about his battlefield prowess and how good he was. And when Eisenhower was promoted to be the chief commander, he got a 2-week vacation and he was sent back to the States in late 1943. And it was there he met, and he decided to keep Patton, but Patton didn't know it. And when he came back, he summoned Patton to England. He relieved him of 7th Army Command, summoned him back to England, and he brought him up and he said, I'm going to retain you and you're going to be 3rd Army Commander. And Patton knew this within the 3rd week of January. So it wasn't like the movie where he didn't know. And Operation Cobra was also planned around it. So that's the truth of the matter. They decided to keep him, but they wanted him to keep his mouth shut and stay out of trouble. Now you know the real story.
Yeah, no, movies on television, all the black and white movies, World War II, you never see many black soldiers out there. What were their main duties in World War II?
Oh, I love that question. Let me tell you. They were, of course, segregated, and that was the law. Wasn't a good law, but that was the law. Patton was an innovator. He saw that there was ways to use troops, but you had a movement with law that he had to overcome. And they were supposed to be separate. But he began to see quite a few indiscrepancies in the way the law was applied. He wrote in his diary that 2 soldiers could do the same offense and the black guy would get a worse sentence than the white guy doing the same thing, a white soldier. So he decided he wasn't going to be one of those kinds of people. He was going to be as fair and as honest and treat them as soldiers. He loved soldiers. His orderly, George Meeks, was black, good friend of his. He had other soldiers that he thought a lot of. O.A. Davis come to visit him. O.A. Davis was the brigadier general. He was the highest ranking black general in the U.S. Army, and his duty was to take care of what they called Negro or colored troops, to see to their needs. He come to visit Patton, and they had a talk. We're never quite sure what was said, but Patton said that he thought he was a very smart old man, and he enjoyed his visit. And it wasn't long after that that Patton sent for, and I made mention to it a minute ago, for 20 of the soldiers that had a race riot in England, and the soldiers, black soldiers, were denied going to officer and enlisted men canteens because they were black. And there was a big fight that ensued, and they got arrested. So he had them taken and brought to him, and he said, "You want to be soldiers, don't you? I want you to be a soldier. So if you don't get any more trouble, this is going to be expunged from your record." And they went on. And that's where he got the idea of taking 1,000 soldiers out of the people that didn't salute and little stuff and putting them back. Then he found out about the 761st Tank Battalion, which was all black. And they'd been training in the States and going around in circles. And they'd been training so long, they knew those tanks backwards and forwards. Says, "Why are they still in the States?" "Well, sir, they're black." "I'll give a shit what color they are. I need soldiers." And when he came to visit them. He said, "Look, you're Negro soldiers. People want to know whether you fight or not. Well, you're in my army now. All I care about is you go and kill Germans. You go kill Germans for me, we're going to get along real fine." And they loved it. And they became one of the most decorated units, black units or any unit, under his command. And they wrote 2 books afterward. And they became, like the Tuskegee Airmen, they became a little bit like legends in the black community because Patton took a chance. He was not what he was not the role that you would think of that everybody else was classified in. And it wasn't until after World War II and they decided to completely segregate the Army, and part of it was because of how well they had done. Mm-hmm. They saw that what they had thought and baloney that they had put out about black troops was just that, baloney. Mm-hmm. And so now we have some of the finest troops in the world, and we really don't care what color they are. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I was talking to a World War II vet. I asked him the same question. He said during the war, after we crossed into France, the black soldiers were used as porters for tanks, food trucks, fuel trucks, munition, just driving 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay, what he was
supplies,
talking about,
bringing supplies.
One of the things he was talking about was the Red Ball Express. Mm-hmm. And most of the trucking companies were black truckers, and they were highly trained, and they were they needed the gasoline from the front, and they went 24/7. They weren't all black. There was white folks in there and everything else. The other thing, I'll tell you a story. When Patton's gasoline was cut, and he needed the gasoline, there was a black trucking company that Patton really liked. He'd gone to their church services on Sunday, and they liked him. So they decided that he needed gasoline. So they put on First Army patch under Bradley. They changed their markings on it, and they got fake requisitions, and they went into Bradley's headquarters and requisitioned a whole lot of gasoline for Patton. Now, he couldn't admit that happened, and they couldn't admit that happened, so he found another reason to give them all a Bronze Star. You see, so it's not like people say it. And when you get into the battlefield, somebody's watching your ass. You don't give a damn what color they are, and they don't give a damn what color. You want to get out of that foxhole alive, yes, or that tank alive. So that's the way it was. Now, that's not to say there wasn't prejudice. There's always going to be prejudice. That's just people being stupid and ignorant. But in Patton's army, and in Patton's mind, it needed to not exist. Yes?
So we know Patton studied European history and European generals. Did he admire any American generals in history?
He loved a lot of the Confederate generals because of their battlefield, and he liked George Washington. But he enjoyed Lee's colonel of cavalry.
Jackson?
Stewart. Because of his brashness and how quick that he could react under fire. He studied these people not for what side they were on, how well they fought as military people in the field, and Robert E. Lee. And then there was another Confederate raider that he knew personally as a child that he enjoyed. He knew all the battlefield generals. He knew which ones were good and which one they didn't care for. So he knew the story of all of them, Grant and McClellan and the whole thing, because he was quite a history buff. There hadn't been that many battles, though, that had been of interest to him on the American front, but the Civil War Confederate generals and what they did were probably his favorite.
Patton actually get into the smallest detail of the supply?
Well, yeah, because what it amounted to, you ever heard, for lack of a horseshoe, the war was lost? What he had was an entire, these things were brought to, they were in a situation report that he would get. And the core problem wasn't the soldiers, in Patton's mind. It was the generals and the officers who didn't make sure that their people below them did that, okay? So he was a man from the top down, and he would hear that kind of stuff. These are exactly out of the daily reports that he received. So what you heard, he actually heard. He went down the road one day, and he saw all these gas cans for a long time, because they were filling the tanks and the trucks up, and they were throwing these jerry cans out. And he ordered them all picked up, because he knew he could run out of gas cans shortly if they were doing what they did. And so he was a detailed man. He once went to a forward headquarters, and they had a Browning water-cooled machine gun there that was overlooking the area. And he went and he looked down and got into the site, and he realized that their field of fire could not protect that particular emplacement, and he had them change it. He was into it. He had served from second lieutenant all the way up to the 4-star general, so he knew all that backwards. He usually stayed out of lower stuff, because that's not what generals do. But he made sure that those who were in charge, if he saw a problem, either fixed it or named their replacement. He was dead serious about it.
Okay, well, my other side, the question is, how much did he actually have, how much did he do in tactical planning? How many of his ideas were converted into an actual battlefield attack?
Everything. He had the final say. When you saw the briefing, it was far more detailed than that. Behind his war room was a situation map room. First in the tent, later in the city. It had where all of the German units were believed to be. It had their commanders. It had the history of where those different commands. He knew what they were going to do, and he knew how they fought, and he studied them all their life. And he says, I know exactly what the Germans are going to do, because I've studied them all my life. They don't have a damn idea what I'm going to do. So he would figure, okay, if I do this, they will do that. If I do that, they will do that. So I'm not going to do either one of that. I'm going to go over there. They don't expect me to do that. And he whooped damn near every one of them that way, because he was always doing what they expected. I'll give you an idea so you understand the tactics that he employed. They had long lines of tactics back then where they would go, and he didn't believe in that. So what he did was a deep thrust. He would have the 19th Air Tactical Command, when they could fly, they would fly over and bomb the target. And immediately, he had his 105s and 155s shell the target. Just as soon as the shelling, and they went in trouble, he'd have a tank, either 2 combat commanders or a full division hit that. Then on the sides, he had 2 cavalry groups watching the flanks so they didn't come back around and envelop him. Once he did that, then the infantry came in and had the position, and the rest of it would start over again. And at night, when he could, he then bombarded them again so they could not counterattack. And doing that, he moved just like that, day in and day out, like a leapfrog. But he knew that as soon as he stopped, they would regroup and counterattack. And when they ran out of the grass, when he's taking the gas away, that's exactly what happened. And he lost a lot of troops that he felt like he would not have lost. And so he was very deep into the actual play, but from an army level. Now understand that an army has 3 corps and 3 divisions in each corps, and one of them usually is an armored division. So he would tell them where he wanted to go and what he wanted to do. Walton Walker, who was 20th Corps commander, all he did was tell him, go take such and such. And if you need any help, get back with me. Because he knew what he was going to do, because he had already had those conversations on how he was going to attack and what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. So that's the level that he maintained, because you can't do it as a general that high up and do minute stuff. It's not possible. There's too much going on. And he no more knew what a platoon was doing out in the field that he could fly, but he knew what the damn division was doing, what the division commander was or wasn't doing, and he would call him on the phone or have messages sent to him, get over there and get across that and do it now. So he took operational control when he could. He ran the Battle of the Bulge. He planned how the 4th Armored Division would zigzag with 2 combat commands and where he wanted them to come out, and he had the intelligence to do it. He had 5,500 men on average in his intelligence, in his headquarters. So they were busy all the time. Yes, sir.
Why was he, those tactics obviously didn't work at Metz.
Why was what?
Those tactics didn't work at the Battle of Metz, the fortress of Metz near Alsace-Lorraine. So he was defeated more or less.
You mean Metz?
Yeah.
Metz was a problem.
Right.
It was a serious problem. Metz had never been taken in modern warfare.
Right.
And they were dug under to the point where they were running B-17s, bombing them with heavy bombers, and they weren't doing anything. So he said, okay, fine, we'll try the old style approach. We'll just bypass them and starve them out. So there was a, forget the name of the unit, it's called the Ghost Battalion, and they made a fake division, actually 2 fake divisions in front of them, and kind of made it where the Germans knew that they were there, they didn't know they were fake, and he had a real division there as well. And then he just bypassed and went on the other way. And they went them out by the attrition, and one would die after another. So that was another tactic he used, and that's an old castle tactic. When they went to the castle and they couldn't take the castle because it was too strong, they surrounded it, they just waited. And that goes all the way back, that idea goes all the way back to the taking of Jerusalem by Titus and Vespasian, who realized that they were going to lose a lot of troops if they went into Jerusalem to take it, so they surrounded the thing and they starved them out. Because they had 60,000 troops against in Jerusalem. Y'all didn't know I knew that history, did you? You see? So, like Patton, I wanted to get into his head. So I studied what he studied to find out why he did what he did. It's a lifelong study, and I'm just now beginning to understand a little bit more than I did. How am I doing? Okay. Yes, sir.
Sir, being a man that has believed himself to be reincarnated from generation to generation of warrior, I can understand why you know such a thing.
Oh boy, have a seat. All right. I'm going to tell you a personal opinion, and it's based on fact, but it's a personal opinion. There is a book called The Patton Principles, and it was written by a man who was there at desert training with Patton. And there's a couple of chapters in there about Patton's religious beliefs. Not once did he ever talk about reincarnation or anything like that. And Patton was a showman, and he liked to get people's reaction. So he would say, "Oh, I was there." And if you saw the movie, you know, he's there with Bradley and the veil of ages and pomp and circumstance of war, and there I was triumphant star. That's from a poem called "Looking No Darkly," and that's first the title is from the Bible. But what he did, he studied them all, so he knew all these battles. Just like I could throw stuff with you about Vespasian and Titus and Jerusalem, I've read Josephus. You see, so he was a Christian. He was Episcopalian. Christianity is incompatible with reincarnation, because if you're a Christian, you believe that Christ died and was resurrected. And so which lifetime was that he died for your sins? Come on. See, that's why it's incompatible. So if you believe in the Christian doctrine, you can't grab on to reincarnation, because the two are incompatible. Either he died for the one lifetime, like the Bible says, or you lived several times. What were you, a scoundrel in one and a saint in the other? Don't work that way. Did it help you?
Yeah.
All right.
One other question, General. I noticed the Bible by your bedside. You have a really fine time to read it, sir.
You know what he wants me to say? You've seen the movie? You know what he wants me to say? He wants me to say, do I have time to read the Bible? And then I would say, every goddamn day. That's what he wants me to say, but I'm not going to say it.
Here's one.
Oh, yes.
Was General Eisenhower on the same level as General Patton in terms of the hierarchy?
No.
Okay, so who was above who, and what was that hierarchy?
Let me answer that in 2 questions. Eisenhower was his boss. Eisenhower was Supreme Allied Expeditionary Force Supreme Commander. He was in charge of everybody. Patton was like 3 steps down as an Army commander. But as a tactician, as a field commander, Eisenhower had never commanded troops in his life. Patton had commanded troops most of his life.
How on earth?
And when when Eisenhower was under Patton, he told Patton one day, "If you ever get a command, I would like to be your XO." You see? So Patton had trained, and he had trained all this. He knew every single general in both theater of operations, both of them, and so Eisenhower knew Patton was the finest commander he had, period, as a tactical technician. He also knew he had the biggest mouth of any commander he had, so he had a problem that he had to work on. Eisenhower was more of a politician general because he had to go through all the different generals in all different countries and get them all working together, which was a horrible job. And he had Churchill to deal with, who always wanted his way. And Churchill, the only way that Churchill wouldn't get his way is if Roosevelt didn't want him to get his way. And then you had Stalin. So Eisenhower had this really difficult political job. Patton just wanted to go out and kill Krause and end the war. So there was quite a bit of difference in the two. And Eisenhower had 4, then later 5 stars, and Patton didn't get his 4th star until April of 1945. Most field generals were lieutenant generals, which was 3 stars. That help you? Yes.
Yeah, General Patton, let's just say the war's going to be ending soon. It's almost over. Do you ever think of putting an application in for police chief for the city of Chicago?
You know, we don't talk modern politics. Everybody has their own thing. I will tell you that I thought that that President Roosevelt was excellent during his time. I was sorry that he passed away. And President Truman took the ball and ran with it, and I, as a general in the United States Army, was happy to serve under both of them.
Political answer.
We just don't talk. We don't do it. Too divisive. We're just about gone. Now, I got one more thing I want to tell you. I have spent the last 10 years writing one of the most definitive set of books that's ever been written about Patton and Third Army. This is it. All one volume. There's 6 books involved. And here is the Patton family. On the left is Helen Patton, who was Patton's granddaughter. Her father was Patton's son. The other one on the left is George Patton Waters, and he is the son of John Waters, who Patton tried to rescue in the famous raid in World War II out of a prisoner of war camp. Both of them have my copies of my book, and they've read them. And there they are holding the books. So when I tell you that I know what I'm talking about, and they've read the books, and they like what they read, or so they tell me, there it is. So the books are for sale. If you go to Amazon, you bought all of them at one time, you spend about $150 plus the shipping, whatever that ends up being, depending on how you deal with Amazon. I'll sell them here, and I'll take a credit card for $130 and their autograph. You get the whole pile. I can't sell them separately, but I wanted you to know they were here in case you were interested. And everything that I have said, plus a bunch of other stuff, is in there. Now, I did not tell you what to think in this book. That's not what these books are about. Got Patton's complete diary. It has what General Gage said. It has what Colonel Wallace said. It has what Chaplain O'Neill says. It has what all of the different people who served under Patton and what they said about whatever it is they said day by day. And then you, as the reader, can form your own opinion. Then you go to the bibliography source. So the guy asked about the dog, you can see where I got the information and what book I got it out of and what page I got it out of, so that you will get the understanding that I have. So if you can read all this, great reading, highly recommended. Oh, now, there we go. Very good. Oh, one last thing. We had one of the nicest honors ever bestowed upon us, our Third Army Historical Society. Last year, we were invited to represent General Patton in the Greatest Generation at the 100th birthday of Third Army, and we were invited to Shaw Air Force Base at U.S. Central, which is the Third Army Command in the United States, and we got to do the War Room presentation for them in the active army. And we were invited by Lieutenant General Garrett. He's now four-star General Garrett is in charge of training. And so we were able to pay our modern troops back with a little history, and we had a wonderful time. And the last thing I would tell you, whenever you see a service person, past, present, or one you think will be future, support them, tell them that you appreciate what they do and what they did, and thank them for their service.